forward. And so finally sent him the third demo, and not just one song, but like a whole album's worth of material. And he called me 3 days later, calls me back and goes, "Hey, I like this. Let's do a record." So that was sort of like, unbelievably exciting as well. And that was right when I was moving to California to go to a guitar school. And then Mike helped me helped me just connect with musicians. Because I didn't know anybody in California. So, I started jamming with musicians that he found. And actually, most of the musicians of my first notable band, Racer X, I found them by going to school, because I was going to GIT. And GIT is in the same building as a bass school and a drum school. So I found a bass player from BIT. I found a drummer from PIT, the Percussion Institute.
Right.
And then the singer of Racer X, Jeff, that was a suggestion from Mike Varney, the producer. And so suddenly we had a band, and started doing local gigs and doing well. It took, the first couple were a little sparse because nobody knew who we were.
Right.
I think because I was already at the school and the students there, like I had an audience of students. And
I'd like to interject on the Racer X thing, because Mr. Big, we all know, everybody knows Mr. Big. Obviously, you had a mega hit, but from a guitar player standpoint, same exact age as you, coming from that era, you guys, Racer X you were probably much more known than maybe it seemed at the time, because I've talked to a lot of other musicians that was the case, especially like the Primuses out there and the people like that. But you guys were, and you were like, this unreal thing. Even with the drill and all that, you even said yourself that you were kind of parodying it. But you were that too. When I came across you guys and saw you guys back then, all of us guitar players, we were just like, that's it. We can't even get close to that. It was unreal. It was otherworldly. So kudos. And even if you may think it was if it was a struggle on your side, people were noticing, big time. And you cemented yourself at that point in my eyes. You really did.
Well, the thing that I remember about Racer X is we just rehearsed more than any band I've ever been in before or since. We were like a military operation. We would take shifts, because we had and that was a big difference between like living in rural Pennsylvania and moving to LA. And in rural Pennsylvania, you just hunt around and you find somebody who would let you use their basement for free.
Right.
And the idea of like paying for rehearsal space was a really new idea. Like, what? We got to pay to rehearse? And so we're doing well enough in the clubs where we could afford to have a lockout, but we could really feel the financial drain of paying for this rehearsal studio. So we're like, man, we got to make the most of it. So, we would literally take shifts. Like the drummer would go in for a couple hours in the afternoon, then he'd leave, then Bruce and I would go in, work on our harmonies, then the bass player, he'd go in by himself, and then at the end of the day, we'd all get together and play as a band. So it was just like nonstop. We didn't sleep there, but we got our money's worth out of that place, and it was just so much rehearsal. And really, that's sort of looking at it now. I mean, we'll fast forward to Behold Electric Guitar. A record like that, very little rehearsal, because it's more depending on the fact that the musicians have all that rehearsal sort of in their DNA.
Right.
And then we're just able to speak. We speak the language. But Racer X was in a way like learning the language, and making it real fluent.
Plus, it's technically, to me, the shift from like what Behold is, and also Behold is very technical, don't get me wrong, but I think with the stuff back then in the 80s and all, the precise breaks and the speed of it alone, probably required a little more precision and rehearsal over and over and over. Even when I would do covers of heavy metal stuff, it wasn't hard to do. It was hard to remember when to stop and start exactly how many times they went 3 and then they went 4 for no reason, whatever. But anyway, so what kind of sprungboard, do you remember the moment that sprungboard Racer X into Mr. Big, or your career from one to the next?
Well, Racer X had, back then the big thing was to get a major record deal. And we were, we were doing well on our indie label, but there was a real limit to what, our career, where it could go on an indie record label. So that was the whole thing. Like, can we get signed? That was the goal back then, and we couldn't. Every label came to see us. It wasn't that they didn't know who we were. We were selling out the biggest clubs in LA. All the people from every record label would come down, watch us, and they'd all say, we don't think so. No. And it was really disheartening. At the same time, we really believed in the band and believed in the music, but after a while, we're like, man, we're just stuck. We can't seem to get this moving anywhere. And right around that time was when Billy Sheehan called me up. And I had already been a huge fan of Billy's from seeing him in the band Talus. They used to play in Pittsburgh a lot, near where I grew up. And so he was, at that time, if I had to list my top, 5 guitar heroes, Billy, even though he's a bass player, he would have been in that list. He was hugely influential to me as a musician, just watching how he played. So for him to, for my phone to ring and Billy to be on the other end was like, oh my God, it's Billy Jean. And we had met briefly a few times. First of all, for me just showing up at the concerts and hanging out, being a fan. Second of all, opening up for, I got a gig opening up for Talus and my cover band back in Pennsylvania. And then when he moved to LA to play with David Lee Roth, at that same time, Racer X started, and those guys used to come see us. We'd get all excited. We'd be about to do a Racer X show and be like, hey, the Roth guys are here. Billy and Steve and Dave, they're all out there. So, Billy was definitely aware of me, and I was aware of him. And he also used to come to do clinics at BIT, and so he'd be walking down the hall to go to the clinic, and he'd see me in a room, and he'd stop in, and we'd jam some Accept songs. So, I think that the thing that sort of got me the gig with Billy was the fact that I knew so many songs, and even though he was older, we really connected on that musical level. That's the language we speak. It's funny. Once in a while, I'll get a student that's good at sight reading, and it's like, man, that's a different way. There's probably, for studio musicians or for classical musicians, that's like how you communicate. But for most rock musicians, you communicate with cover songs. Yeah. You go like, hey, it's that lick from Heartbreaker, or it's that chord from that chord from that Beatles song, or it's all these
referring
to this common knowledge of music that you've learned or listened to.
That's our college. That's our school that we grew up in.
Yeah, and so I kind of, that was my in with Billy is any song Billy would name. He'd go, oh, I know that, because I had always played with older musicians and had learned, I learned my parents' record collection, so that was the connection. And then Billy told me he was forming a band, and I joined.
What's your favorite Racer X riff?
Oh man, well I'll come up with that. The first one that comes to mind was Gone Too Far.
Can you play it for us?
Which is that 1, 2, 3, 4. And actually the end of that was totally influenced by Talus, Billy's band, because the end of these it's all these triplets where the drummer's just hitting crashes with the kick drum, and that's the kind of thing that Talus would do. They'd be going like and that sort of thing was so powerful. So I came up with my own chords, but that was essentially me trying to do Talus.
That was awesome. That is so awesome. Appreciate it. Want to keep your fingers warm. So you got with Billy, and I guess, and was Mike Varney involved in the Mr. Big transition or formation?
In one way, because we Billy and I started jamming together, or at least talking about it. And I'm actually not sure of the timeline, because I thought I was the first one. But then, in later interviews, we'd be doing an interview in Japan or something, and then Billy would tell the story of the founding of the band. He's like, "Oh, I talked to Eric first." It was like, "Really?" I thought, so I don't know who talked to who, but I know that Billy wanted to find a singer, and he contacted Mike Varney, and Mike said, "Oh, there's this guy Eric Martin. He lives in they knew each other because they both lived in the Bay Area, and Billy listened to some of Eric's singing, and I had a couple of Eric's records already. I thought he was great, so that seemed to make sense, and it did.
Absolutely. And I've read before on To Be With You, it was a little bit of a departure from, obviously you and Billy Sheehan and the kind of band that you came from, for sure. Can you tell us a little bit about, the kind of the thrill ride that was To Be With You? Because not too many people on this planet get to have a #1 smash hit like that and get that ride.
Yeah, that was, well, I would say with my guitar playing, I had been teaching at GIT, but had been in Racer X, and had been like culminating to this sort of shred mountaintop. And then I got to the top and looked around and went like, I kind of missed the Beatles, because that was the stuff I grew up with. I didn't grow up. I mean, I grew up like listening to Led Zeppelin, but really before that, it was like all pop music. And I was into the Beatles, Elton John, the pop music that was on the radio. And then later on, I got into Zeppelin, and then, by the time I heard Van Halen, I was, I'd been listening to music for so long that it was, I loved it. It was exciting. It was my favorite thing, but it wasn't the only thing. I just had this foundation of melody and pop songwriting, and if you work in a restaurant and you cook the same thing every day, after a while you start to crave a different flavor. And no matter how good it is. And so, I started to sort of rediscover the Beatles stuff, the old Beach Boys catalog, Todd Rundgren, and just, and I started to learn piano, and not only the piano itself, but how to play like piano parts on guitar and the kind of chords that piano players use. And it really, it made me just want more melody in our songs.
You had a moment at a Todd Rundgren concert, I believe, that you had told me about that kind of changed you a bit because
Oh man, yeah. When I saw him live, I was like sobbing and just going like, what? Why is this happening? I've never been this emotionally affected at a show. And it wasn't, the guitar player was great, but it wasn't the guitar playing that was doing it. It was the song and the singing and the dynamics and all this other stuff. And I thought, I got to pay attention to that because it's powerful. Yeah. So the song "To Be With You," I didn't write it, but one day I was driving around with Eric, and he said he knew that I liked the Beatles and that kind of stuff. So he said, "Oh, I got this song. It's kind of Beatley." He said, "Check this out." And he put in the cassette, and I heard it, and I thought, "Oh, I love that song. That's great." And some time went by, and I couldn't get the song out of my head, and so finally I wrote. Or I called Eric, that was the days of the phone, and I said, "Man, Eric, that song you played me, the kind of Beatley one, can you send me a cassette of that?" And so he sent it down, and it was my job to make like the rehearsal tapes. We'd rehearse, and I always set up all the mics and made tapes of our rehearsals. Then I would add the dual cassette dubbing deck, and I'd make a cassette for everybody so everybody could remember the songs. Right. And at the end, I put "To Be With You," and I didn't tell anybody. And of course, Eric knew the song already, but Billy and Pat hadn't heard it. And I just put it on there and didn't say a word. And a couple hours later, after I gave everybody the cassette, my phone starts ringing, and Billy's like, "What's that song at the end? It's amazing." And said, Pat called me up, "What's that song? It's unbelievable." And so, even though I think the world saw us as metal shredders or whatever, we all had that part of us that loved a good song. And I think that the thing that was a really nice surprise is that when Billy formed the band, I think primarily he was looking for let's get a great singer and guys that can play really well. But it turned